Welcome to Midnight Rain Tales. The world sleeps, and the rain begins to whisper. In this quiet hour, stories drift through the night air, soft, chilling, unforgettable. Here, under the midnight sky, we share the tales the rain refuses to forget. Stay close and listen. The security feed spooled through its cycle again, each repetition etching a deeper chill into the marrow of my bones. There I stood, rendered in grainy monochrome, securing the office threshold at precisely 11:23 p.m., attaché case a familiar weight in my hand, undeniably the last soul departing. Then the witching hour struck, midnight. A stutter in the building's electrical heartbeat, a flicker, and the vast open-plan expanse, moments before a void, teemed with life. Desks that were starkly empty now cradled hunched silhouettes, fingers dancing over keyboards in a silent, frantic ballet. Their countenances remained obscured, a frustrating blur, yet their motions possessed an unnerving, irrefutable humanity. I squeezed my eyes shut, massaging the bridge of my nose. Had sleeplessness finally conjured phantoms from fatigue? But the screen, relentless, offered no reprieve. The spectral workforce remained. At 7 minutes past the hour, another electrical tremor, and just as suddenly, emptiness reclaimed the floor. Not a whisper, not a shadow betrayed their recent occupation. "Mr. Thorne," Finian's voice, tentative, threaded through my bewildered state. Our resident tech wizard, Finn, hovered uncertainly. "Sir, should I report this to someone?" A slow shake of my head, my gaze still captive to the monitor's unsettling tableau. "Not yet, Finian. Let this remain between us for the moment. Can you isolate this segment? Send me a secure copy." Finn nodded, a visible wave of relief washing over him at being excused from this particular abyss. As his footsteps retreated down the corridor, I collapsed into the worn leather of my chair, mind a frantic cascade of disbelief. What in God's name had I just laid eyes upon? 5 years I'd helmed the night shift at Aegis Mutual Assurance. 5 years where the peak of peculiarity involved coaxing a tipsy junior associate out from under a desk where he'd sought his misplaced smartphone. This, however, inhabited a different reality altogether. Logic scrabbled for purchase, a sophisticated system error perhaps, a prank of monumental complexity, yet a colder certainty settled deep within me. Something profoundly inexplicable had unfolded within these walls last night, and a leaden premonition whispered, it was far from over. That evening, the familiar route home went untraveled. I fabricated a demanding project for my wife, consciously ignoring the thread of worry tightening her voice. As the minutes bled towards midnight, I ensconced myself in the security nerve center, screens reflecting the stark anticipation in my eyes. 11:58, 11:59. The frantic thudding in my chest became an internal drumbeat. Midnight. The lights pulsed, a brief syncope, exactly as the recording foretold. Then, my breath hitched, jaw slackening. The office floor, previously a study in ordered vacancy, pulsed with occupants. Not the familiar faces of my daytime team, though. These figures shimmered translucent, their outlines wavering like heat haze. They moved with a disquieting, focused energy, typing onto screens I knew were dark, sifting through locked filing cabinets with insubstantial fingers. Warring against the primal scream urging retreat, I pushed open the security room door. A symphony of phantom keystrokes filled the air, underscored by a low, pervasive susurrus, a collective murmur just beyond the grasp of understanding. None of the spectral forms registered my presence as I moved, a trespasser among ghosts navigating the aisles with cautious steps. Closer now, I could perceive the desks, the chairs, the very walls, through their ethereal bodies. Ghost workers, the thought struck with hysterical clarity. I'm witnessing ghost workers. One entity pivoted abruptly towards me, a gasp lodged in my throat. Where its face should have been, only a swirling vortex of mist resided, yet undeniably, impossibly, I felt its gaze lock onto mine. An eternity seemed compressed into that silent exchange. Then, glacially, a translucent hand lifted, beckoning. My own volition felt suspended. My feet carried me forward. The phantasmal figure gestured towards its terminal. To my astonishment, lines of text scrolled across the spectral screen. Indecipherable code, perhaps, or streams of data utterly alien to me. What is this? The whisper escaped my lips, expecting only silence in return. Shockingly, a voice answered, not aloud, but blooming directly within the confines of my mind. We work. It resonated, simple, factual. As we have always worked, as we will always work. But why? My own voice trembled audibly now. Who are you? The misty locus that served as its head tilted. We are the remainder, the reverberations of dedication, of lives poured into labor. We persist long after the flesh has relinquished its claim. My gaze swept the vast office, truly seeing its history layered upon the present. How many individuals had anchored their existence to these workstations, invested lifetimes into these tasks? The realization was simultaneously staggering and profoundly sorrowful. Can I help you? The question felt inadequate, yet it was all I could offer. The presence seemed to ponder this. You perceive us, the internal voice returned, tinged with something akin to surprise. That is unforeseen. Perhaps, yes, perhaps you can assist. An error resists our efforts. It indicated the screen once more. This time the spectral data resolved into something recognizable, a client dossier. At the top, the name Clara Hayes shimmered. This one, the ghost voice imparted. Her claim met wrongful denial. Night upon night we strive to amend the record, but the physical realm yields little to our touch. I stared, mind reeling. Could this be happening? Was I genuinely receiving instructions from a spectral remnant to rectify an insurance claim? But the name resonated. Clara Hayes, a recent tragic news item, a young mother, cancer stealing her future, denied coverage for a potentially life-saving experimental treatment. A heartbreaking story, filed away mentally as outside my purview. With hands that shook, I settled before the nearest tangible computer, its system booting with agonizing slowness. Around me, the spectral activity paused. A collective silent observation commenced. I felt the palpable weight of their incorporeal expectancy, their fragile hope. Locating Clara Hayes's file within our labyrinthine digital archives took nearly an hour. The ghost spoke truth. An error, a simple, overlooked clerical slip, had metastasized into catastrophic denial. A few keystrokes stood between this spectral impasse and correction. I paused, the cursor blinking accusingly. This breached protocol, flagrantly. Accessing and altering files beyond my authorization courted serious repercussions. But then my thoughts turned to Clara, to her family, to these restless echoes laboring ceaselessly to rectify an injustice. I made the change. The instant I hit save, a collective exhalation, silent yet profound, seemed to ripple through the office. The ghost workers began to dissolve, their forms growing fainter, more transparent with each passing second. The entity who had communicated turned towards me a final time. "Thank you," its mental voice conveyed, imbued with palpable relief, profound gratitude. "We may rest now." Then they vanished. The office stood empty, silent, returned to its mundane state. I remained seated for a long while, staring at the screen where Clara Hayes's newly amended file cast a soft digital glow. Emerging into the pre-dawn light that morning, the world felt subtly altered, sharper, perhaps, yet imbued with a deeper layer of mystery. My job, any job, could never be viewed through the same lens again. The true weight of our actions, the ripples spreading outwards into other lives, it all resonated with a newfound, startling significance. I never witnessed the spectral workforce again. Subsequent midnight security recordings consistently showed an unoccupied office, yet sometimes burning the midnight oil, I catch the faintest echo of typing, a low murmur just beneath the threshold of hearing, and occasionally, reviewing old cases, I'll encounter a file that feels discordant, a claim dismissed on a technicality, a client lost in the bureaucratic shuffle. In those moments, I remember Clara Hayes and the tireless spirits tethered to their work until an error found its correction, and I do what is within my power to set things right. No one else knows what transpired that night. Who would lend credence to such a tale? But it irrevocably altered me, reshaping my approach to my work, my life. I move with greater diligence now, acutely aware of the enduring signature left by every decision, every keystroke, because I know now that our labor echoes long after we depart, and sometimes, if fortune allows, we are granted a chance to make a difference, to mend a fracture, even from beyond the veil. Each night as I secure the office doors, I pause within the darkened expanse. "Good night," I whisper into the stillness, towards the rows of empty desks. "And thank you." And sometimes, just sometimes, I fancy I hear a whispered reply carried on the still air. "Thank you." Each morning began with a ritual, the decisive click of the deadbolt securing the door behind me, a confirming rattle of the knob, a final glance. Not paranoia, precisely, but a persistent hum beneath the surface of things, a gut-level certainty that equilibrium was disturbed, because every return brought fresh disquiet, minor violations of the space I temporarily called home. Day 1, a dining chair canted at an angle previously unoccupied. Day 2, the coffee table nudged infinitesimally from its moorings. Day 3, a cupboard left agape, a dark mouth I distinctly recalled sealing shut. An alien presence seemed to seep from the very walls of that flat, a silent cohabitant whose existence I felt more than knew. This furnished way station had become necessary. My own apartment languished under the slow ministrations of renovators. 8 weeks, the contractor estimated, prompting the rental of this nearby perch. It was compact, efficient, a modest living area flowing into a kitchenette, a separate bedroom, a sliver of a bathroom. The furniture included was aggressively generic. Sofa, coffee table, lone armchair, a small dining set, bed, wardrobe. Functional anonymity. The building itself boasted a sleek, modern lobby, a reception desk, and corridors lined with uniform doors. Mine was 6th floor, adjacent to the lift. The first week passed in a blur of work and fatigue. The flat merely a place to collapse. Nothing registered. Then a Friday evening unfurled. Slumped on the sofa, bathed in the television's flickering glow, my gaze snagged on the armchair. It sat askew, closer to the window than I remembered positioning it. A shrug, a mental note. The cleaner. Weekly housekeeping was part of the deal, wasn't it? Checked the schedule. A plausible explanation, yet the dissonance lingered. I rose, nudged the chair back into alignment with an invisible grid in my mind, and tried to let the unease dissipate. Saturday morning, coffee brewing. The cupboard above the sink hung open, a careless oversight. Surely my own. I clicked it shut, poured my coffee, moved on. That night, returning late, exhaustion clinging like damp clothes, I stopped dead just inside the doorway. The coffee table, it had migrated perhaps 2 feet towards the sofa. Tuesday was cleaning day. This was Saturday. No unscheduled visits authorized. A frantic pulse kicked up in my throat. A leaden weight settled in my stomach. I circled the table, knelt, peered underneath. Nothing. Sinking onto the sofa, TV remote in hand, I tried to rationalize. An unconscious act? A lapse in memory? Sleep came, but it was shallow, restless. Monday, at the reception desk, I inquired, voice carefully neutral. Had anyone accessed my unit over the weekend? The woman consulted the digital logs, her expression placid. Only my key fob registered. Housekeeping on Saturdays. A negative shake of the head. A chill traced its way down my spine. I manufactured a smile, retreated to the lift, ascended to my floor. Inside the flat, an initial survey revealed nothing amiss. Kitchen, fridge, water bottle in hand. I turned. The bedroom door stood open. I always closed it. Always. I remained rooted, water bottle cooling my palm, staring into the dim bedroom. Unmade bed, closed wardrobe, drawn curtains. Nothing overtly sinister. Perhaps I had left it open. But the anxiety tightening in my chest felt ancient, primal. Later, emerging from the shower's steam, toweling off in the bedroom, a sound pricked the quiet. A faint click from the living room, unnervingly like the television powering on. Shirt half buttoned, I hurried out. The television was dark, but the floor lamp beside the sofa, the one I never used, cast a warm, accusatory glow. I distinctly recalled leaving it off. My heartbeat hammered against my ribs. I crossed the room, extinguished the light, scanned the space. Windows latched, front door secure, closet empty, beneath the sofa, nothing. A systematic sweep, lights blazing, yielded no intruder. Back on the sofa, a tremor ran through my arms. My thoughts scattered like startled birds. An accident, a flick of the switch as I passed. The explanation felt thin, brittle. The second week, a new tactic. A minuscule scrap of paper wedged high between the door and its frame each morning. If the door opened, the paper would fall. One evening, it lay accusingly on the welcome mat. A call downstairs. The receptionist, polite but firm. No entries recorded. The hallway camera. It monitored the lift bank, not individual doorways. Perhaps the paper simply fell. Possible, yes, but suspicion curdled within me. Another way in. A service hatch. A forgotten connection. The flat offered no obvious clues, yet the air felt thick, confining. Sleep became elusive, chased away by imagined creaks and phantom movements. Work suffered, concentration frayed. Had they been here while I was out? Were they here now, concealed just beyond my line of sight? One afternoon, an impulse seized me. I left work at midday, citing errands, arriving back at the building around 12:30. The corridor stretched silent, ear pressed to my own door. Nothing. Key sliding into the lock, turning softly. Inside, a slow, cautious advance. Then a faint groan of wood from the short hallway leading to the bedroom and bath. The sound of a door easing shut. My throat constricted. I surged down the hall. The bathroom door slightly ajar. I shoved it open, flicked on the light. Empty. Shower, toilet, sink. The bedroom door also open now. I burst in, eyes darting. Wardrobe checked, drawers pulled. Vacant. A flush of heat rose to my face. No forced entry, nothing disturbed. Yet the sound. Had I imagined it? Old hinges protesting. Or was my grasp on reality loosening? That night, I requisitioned a small folding chair from the office, positioned it in the hallway outside the bedroom facing the bathroom. There I sat, cloaked in darkness, phone clutched like a talisman waiting. Midnight passed. Drowsiness descended, heavy and insistent. My neck ached. Around 1 a.m., a soft thump emanated from the living room. A collision, perhaps? Table leg, sofa arm. I scrambled up, phone flashlight slicing the dark. Empty space greeted me. Sofa undisturbed, table aligned. But the lamp. The lamp beside the sofa glowed again. I hadn't touched it. Gooseflesh prickled my arms. Another frantic circuit of the room, checking, searching. I found myself back in the hallway. The bedroom door, previously wide open, was now pulled halfway shut. Adrenaline surged, hot and metallic, heart hammering. I flung the door open, light beams sweeping the interior. Still empty. Sweat beaded on my temples. Sleep was impossible now. The third week crawled by. At work, I was a jittery mess, double-checking everything. My focus shattered. At home, I attempted to record the flat's interior using my phone propped on a shelf, but the battery invariably died before capturing anything useful. A proper security camera was beyond my stretched finances, drained by the ongoing renovation. The thought of breaking the lease surfaced, tempting but impractical. Where would I go? Besides, a stubborn knot of defiance had formed. I needed answers. Was this delusion or a deliberate, unseen torment? One afternoon, approaching my floor from the lift, I heard it distinctly. Movement from within my flat. Footsteps, muffled but undeniable, on the other side of the door. Fumbling with the key, heart pounding, I tried to be silent, swift, hoping to catch them. The lock clicked open, I pushed the door inward, and simultaneously heard a faint squeak from the bedroom area. I sprinted down the short hall. The bedroom door was closed. I seized the handle, yanked. Empty. Wardrobe flung open, under the bed peered into, drawers rifled, bedside table scrutinized. Nothing. My hands shook. A dull ache bloomed in my chest. Bathroom next. Empty. Living room. Kitchenette. All appeared normal except the armchair. It had pivoted again, now facing the sofa directly. I had not left it that way. Downstairs again. The receptionist listened, her professional mask firmly in place, as I described the shifting furniture. A previous tenant, a spare key? Impossible, she assured me. Locks recently changed. Management would be notified. No one else had entered. Her gaze held a mixture of pity and disbelief. I felt utterly alone, adrift with this inexplicable haunting. That night, a different strategy. Objects placed with geometric precision. Shoes aligned against the wall by the entrance. A pen laid perfectly parallel to the edge of the TV stand. Kitchen chairs angled just so. Reference photos taken on my phone. I retreated to a nearby bar, nursing a drink, killing time. Returned around 9 p.m., compared the scene to the photos. One shoe nudged inches askew. The pen, now crooked, a knot tightened in my gut. No sound, no sign of intrusion. Another futile search, punctuated by my own voice echoing against the sterile walls. Whoever you are, I know you're here. Silence answered. My face burned with a volatile mix of fear and fury. The fourth week commenced under a pall of exhaustion. My boss noticed, urged a day off. I complied, barricading myself inside the flat, refusing even to fetch groceries. Silence reigned until late afternoon. In the bathroom, washing my hands, door left open behind me. A soft click, sharp and clear from the vicinity of the bedroom. Water dripping from my fingers, I spun around, rushed out. The bedroom door was swinging gently shut. I lunged, flung it open, stepped inside. Empty, again. The wardrobe stood closed. I approached it slowly, hand hovering over the handle, breath held captive in my chest. A swift pull. Empty hangers, folded clothes, nothing behind them. Drawers pulled out, shallow recesses revealing only their contents. Sweat slicked my skin, my breathing ragged. A bizarre, one-sided game of hide and seek, played against an invisible, relentless opponent. The remainder of the day was spent in restless pacing, obsessive checking. Doors, windows, under the bed, all secure. Night fell. I dragged a dining chair to the bedroom door, wedging it firmly beneath the handle. Locked the window, plugged in my phone, lay down under the faint urban glow filtering through the curtains. Every creak, every sigh of the building amplified. Sleep was a distant shore. Around 3 a.m., consciousness finally began to fray, only to be shattered by a dull thud from beyond the door. I sat bolt upright, heart seizing. Bedside lamp clicked on. The chair remained wedged, undisturbed. The door shut fast. I crept closer, pressed my ear to the wood. Faint, unmistakable footsteps padding across the living room floor. Trapped. Heart drumming a frantic rhythm against my ribs. Open the door and they'd vanish, melting into the shadows as always. Stay put and endure the torment. Minutes stretched, thick with indecision. Then, resolve hardening, I pulled the chair away, eased the door open. The living room lay steeped in darkness, silence, lights on, a meticulous scan. Nothing, calm surfaces, empty corners, except the coffee table, shifted again, barely an inch, but undeniably moved. A silent scream built in my throat. This wasn't exhaustion, this wasn't imagination, this had to end. Morning, I fled to my apartment's construction site, pleaded with the contractor. Urgency, problem, extra pay, whatever it took. He promised to expedite, aiming for another week. Back in the haunted flat, I began packing, boxing up my temporary existence. Nights were spent under the glare of every light bulb. Faint sounds still whispered from the hallway, but I ignored them, focused solely on departure. Last day, suitcases huddled by the door, a final reluctant walkthrough. The armchair, sentinel-like, faced the wall. A cupboard door hung slightly ajar. I closed it gently, a final futile gesture of order. Then I walked away. No answers, no confrontation, no understanding of who or what had shared that space. Was there a hidden alcove, a secret passage I'd overlooked, a copied key, or had the stress, the isolation, frayed the edges of my own perception? The truth remained elusive. My own apartment, blessedly solid and familiar, was ready the following week. I moved in, the strange interlude locked away, unspoken, yet the residue remains. A heightened sensitivity to the night's creaks, a compulsive double check of the locks. The memory of that flat, the feeling of unseen eyes, the subtle rearrangement of my world by invisible hands. It lingers, a cold spot beneath the skin, a chilling uncertainty I hope remains only a memory. That inheritance from my grandfather, the steamer trunk, sat like a sarcophagus in the attic dust. I'd assumed it held moth-eaten uniforms, perhaps brittle photographs. What I unearthed instead felt less like memory and more like a spore. My name is Elias. I chase the flicker of stage lights, a devotee of borrowed lives, content even with the cramped stages of community halls and cellar theaters. The resonance of my own voice shaped by a playwright's words, the shedding of skin into someone new. These are my addictions, but the manuscript I found, bound in coarse twine, was unlike any text I'd ever held. It was 3 weeks ago, maybe 4. The attic air hung thick and motionless as I pried open the trunk's complaining lid. No title adorned the brittle foxed pages, only a sigil, stark in black ink below the first lines. A warped, unsettling loop, like a serpent consuming its own distorted reflection. I began reading then and there, crouched under the weak beam of my torch, the stale air coating my tongue. The words felt ancient, abrasive. They spoke of entities slumbering beyond the stars, of rites that clawed at the veil between worlds, punctuated by a bizarre, recurring chant. When exactly I decided to carry it down from that suffocating space, I cannot recall, only that I did. A lost relic, I reasoned. Some forgotten playwright's fever dream. A peculiar challenge, perhaps, ripe for adaptation, for the thrill of mastering its jagged rhythms. So it came home with me. My apartment, 2 rooms, a cramped bath, usually soundtracked only by the low thrum of the refrigerator. That evening, beneath the solitary glow of a floor lamp, I let the lines spill into the quiet. The first pass was clumsy, the archaic syntax and the guttural names of these cosmic horrors catching in my throat. The sentences were often short, yet freighted with an unnerving weight. By the close of the first act, a distinct coldness prickled the skin of my arms. The thermostat hadn't dipped. It was the text, I assured myself, its inherent strangeness seeping out. I closed the manuscript, slid it onto the coffee table, and sought refuge in the television's bland light. Morning found it waiting, A flicker of revulsion urged me to discard it, yet a stronger, more insidious curiosity pulled me back. The day stretched ahead, empty of obligations. I took the script into the bedroom, positioning myself before the full-length mirror, affixed to the closet door, eager to watch the transformation. The lines demanded intensity, describing a primordial force that commanded not just reverence, but terror. One passage resonated. I invoke thee, I bear my mind to thy regard. As the words left my lips, a distinct click-thump echoed from the hallway, the sound of a door settling firmly into its frame. I froze, listening, my pulse hammered against my ribs. The hallway lay empty, still. No draft could explain it. Checking, I found the bathroom door slightly ajar, though perhaps it had been all along. A nervous laugh escaped me, hollow in the quiet room, but the frantic rhythm in my chest refused to subside. The following days blurred, a strange counterpoint between the mundane demands of my job and these private, obsessive rehearsals. I had no audience in mind, no performance scheduled, yet mastering the lines felt imperative. Each time I grasped the manuscript, a clammy dampness bloomed on my palms. I forced myself upright, pages trembling slightly, voicing the incantations. Sometimes the distinct sensation of being observed prickled the back of my neck. Other times faint metallic chimes, like the ghost of disturbed chains, drifted from the adjacent room. The building's old pipes, I rationalized, or a neighbor rearranging furniture. Yet the sound seemed tethered to one specific section, the passage concerning the summoning of something vast and unknowable. During one session, deep into the second act's monologue detailing forbidden rituals, the steps to fracture reality, to carve open a gateway, I reached the phrase, "I prepare the circle and offer my voice." A violent crack exploded from the kitchen. I jolted, spinning around, heart leaping. I half expected an intruder. Instead, my simple wooden kitchen chair lay overturned, legs askew on the linoleum. A thorough search revealed nothing, no one. The front door remained bolted. Logic offered no solace. Standing the chair upright, my hand trembled violently. Cold sweat beaded on my brow. Enough, I told myself, retreating from the script for the night. A few evenings later, seeking a larger arena, I moved the rehearsal to the living room. I paced as I spoke, letting the character inhabit the space. The first act began again. My gaze kept drifting towards the hallway arch, the feeling of unseen eyes intensifying. Floorboards groaned beneath my deliberate steps. I fought to maintain focus, but my voice wavered, betraying the tremor within. I spoke the lines of supplication, of bending one's will to the ancient watchers. Abruptly, the overhead light fixture stuttered, dimming momentarily before flaring back. My breath hitched. Deeper breaths forced calm. I pressed on. As I neared the act's closing lines, an icy current of air traced a path across the nape of my neck, intimate as a cold breath. I whirled around. Windows sealed, balcony door locked, no vents nearby. The chill lingered, intensifying. "It's just suggestion," I muttered aloud, the words thin in the charged air. The sensation didn't retreat. It coiled tighter, my teeth beginning to chatter involuntarily. Setting the script aside, I fled to the bathroom, splashing cool water on my face. It felt oddly warm against my frigid skin. My reflection stared back, hollow-eyed, pallid. A break was necessary. Work the next day was a fog. The script exerted a gravitational pull on my thoughts, rendering concentration impossible. My boss inquired about my well-being. I offered a vacant nod. All I could visualize were the unread pages, the lines I hadn't yet given voice to. Come lunchtime, abandoning routine, I drove home. Inside, curtains drawn against the midday sun, I retrieved the manuscript. My heart hammered as I opened it, the pages emitting a faint, damp odor. A dull ache pulsed behind my eyes, but I plunged into the third act. It was darker, denser, culminating in a final chant demanding a voice of absolute command. I uttered the first few words, and the apartment's power flickered violently. I recoiled, the hair on my arms prickling. My breathing grew ragged, my chest tight. Still, I pushed forward, line after line. The building itself seemed to groan around me. Distinct footsteps sounded overhead, impossible on the top floor. I ignored them. My throat felt scraped raw. After a hurried gulp of water, I continued. Then came the sound, faint at first but undeniable. Chains dragging across the floorboards in the hallway. Louder it grew, a dry, rasping scrape. I lowered the script, moved cautiously towards the sound. Nothing. The noise persisted until I finally whispered, "I'm stopping now." Instantly, silence fell. Sleep became elusive. Lying in darkness, the script's alien cadences looped relentlessly in my mind, an internal echo I couldn't silence. I found myself pacing the living room in the dead hours, an invisible pressure settling on my shoulders, murmuring those bizarre phrases aloud without conscious thought. The words seared into my memory. A week crawled by. An undeniable compulsion solidified. I had to perform it, the entire piece from beginning to end. Perhaps completion would bring exorcism, a release. One evening, I transformed the living room. Coffee table shoved aside, lights dimmed low, a single chair placed stage left. Taking a ragged breath, I began. My voice, initially thin and reedy, found its footing, sinking into the persona. During Act 1, the overhead light pulsed again. Soft, insistent rapping emanated from within the walls. My mouth went dry. I drove the words out, ignoring the phantom skittering that seemed to trace the baseboards. Act 2 brought the familiar cold draft, but this time it eddied around me, a contained vortex. Gooseflesh pebbled my arms. My breath hitched in ragged bursts. Still I spoke. My hearing felt muffled, submerged. A strange tingling danced in my fingertips. Shadows writhed in my peripheral vision, though nothing solid moved to cast them. Approaching the final act, my head throbbed fiercely. My heartbeat felt concussive against my ribs. My eyes burned, dry from lack of blinking. Breathing became a conscious, difficult effort. I stumbled over a line, repeated it louder, forcing it out. A crash echoed from the kitchen, ignored. A metallic tang bloomed on my tongue, ignored. The final pages detailed the ultimate invocation. My own voice sounded distant, amplified. My lips quivered, but the words emerged, torn from my throat. Reaching the very last line, my legs buckled. I gripped the chair back for support. Voice raw, rasping, I uttered the sentence. I open the path and surrender to the Watchers. Instantly, a brutal gust of wind exploded through the room. Curtains billowed violently towards the ceiling. The lamp flickered, casting spastic shadows. I staggered backward, teeth clenched against the penetrating cold. Whispers erupted, sourceless. a multitude of voices murmuring just below comprehension, filling the space, pressing in. My gaze snagged on the decorative mirror angled in the corner. Not my reflection. Faces, pale, spectral, with cavernous, empty eyes. Rows upon rows of them, a silent, watchful audience crammed within the silvered glass, staring out. Bile rose in my throat. I wrenched my gaze away, but the weight of their scrutiny remained, a physical pressure on my shoulders. Movement felt impossible, my limbs leaden, numb. My hands spasmed, sending the manuscript fluttering to the floor. I tried to cry out, but only a choked gasp escaped my open mouth. The whispering intensified, swirling, echoing off the walls, a deafening susurrus inside my skull. The cold wind surged again, rattling furniture, setting the lamp into a wild swing. My breath came in short, painful gasps. I hunched over, sharp, electric jolts tracing my spine. I risked another glance at the mirror. The faces seemed closer, their silent lips promising unheard horrors. A magnetic pull held my gaze. Somehow I broke free, shuffling backward until my spine hit the wall. My heart hammered, a frantic drum against the cacophony. Sweat slicked my skin, instantly chilling. My clothes clung, damp and cold. Forcing my eyes shut, I sucked in a breath. When I opened them, the mirror held only my own terrified face. Silence descended, abrupt and heavy. The lamp hung still. The curtains settled. Warmth sluggishly seeped back into the air. I swiped a trembling hand across my forehead. My legs remained unsteady, but the immediate terror began to recede. I surveyed the room. Scattered pages, the overturned chair, trinkets dislodged from shelves. Yet the feeling of proximity, of presence, was stronger, sharper than ever. Something stood just beside me, unseen but palpable. Turning towards the door felt like wading through unseen currents. Should I flee? The thought of carrying this contamination into the hallway, potentially infecting the building, rooted me to the spot. Hand on the doorknob, I focused on steadying my breath, eyes darting, searching the now still room. Nothing moved, yet the certainty of not being alone was absolute. A heavy cloak draped over my senses. The air tasted stale, thick with the bitter tang of my own fear. I tried to speak again, my throat raw. Finally, a whisper escaped. "I'm done." I listened, bracing for the return of the whispers. Only the thick, watchful silence answered, punctuated by the frantic thudding in my chest. I retreated to the bathroom, locking the door behind me with shaking hands. Cold water flowed over my fingers, a grounding sensation. I splashed my face, met my reflection, pale, sweat-sheened, hair plastered to my forehead, eyes wide with residual shock. I focused on the drip of water from my chin, breathing slowly. Minutes passed. The frantic edge of fear dulled, my heartbeat slowed. The chill dissipated, but the room still felt occupied. An unseen tension hummed in the air. Sliding down the door, I hugged my knees, pressing back the hot sting of tears. Eventually, legs still weak, I rose and unlocked the door. The apartment lay quiet. Manuscript pages littered the living room floor beneath the lamp's steady glow. No shadows danced, no chains rattled, but the awareness of being watched hadn't lessened. I moved stiffly, gathering the pages, my mind racing, constantly glancing over my shoulder. Nothing overt happened. I stacked the sheets haphazardly on the table, instinct screaming not to read them again. I stood there, breathing heavily, surveying the minor chaos. My back ached, My neck was stiff with tension. The performance was over, every line delivered, but the presence felt cemented, amplified. It clung like static, raising the hairs on my skin. I stared at the lamp, arms hanging heavy, trembling slightly. Forcing movement, I headed towards the bedroom, each step an effort against the thickened air. Turning off the living room light, closing the door behind me, felt like sealing myself in rather than shutting something out. A soft, cool draft brushed past me in the dim hallway. Goosebumps erupted anew. Reaching the bedroom, I collapsed onto the bed, fully clothed, staring up into the oppressive darkness. Every mundane sound, the distant refrigerator hum, my own ragged breathing, felt amplified, sharp. Would I ever truly feel alone in this space again? Closing my eyes offered no escape, only fleeting impressions of shifting shapes in the blackness, phantom whispers curling near my ear. My body refused rest, taut as a drawn wire. The final line echoed, a relentless refrain. I opened the path and surrendered to the watchers. A desperate regret washed over me. I wish I hadn't said it, but the words were spoken, and now, even in the profoundest solitude, I am quite certain I am not alone. There is no clearer way to state this simple, terrifying truth. Children's laughter spilled across the green, bright sound against the sudden, sharp iciness blooming beneath my ribs. I saw him then, a solitary shape anchored near the swings, his camera a focused, unblinking eye. It wasn't aimed at the painted horses of the carousel, nor the sugary clouds spun at the candy floss stall. His lens drank in the playground, the small figures darting across the wood chips. In that suspended moment, I couldn't fathom the depths. This instinct, this urge to step forward, would excavate within me a chasm of memory that would echo for years. It was the 4th of July. The town common pulsed, a vibrant organism breathing barbecue smoke and the buttery sweetness of fried dough. Families unfurled across a patchwork quilt of blankets. I was there with Lena, my sister, and her whirlwind children, breathing in a day snatched free from the demanding rhythm of my social work caseload. Relaxation, celebration, that was the mandate. Yet, years spent navigating the shadowed edges of childhood vulnerability had sharpened some internal compass, made it quiver at the scent of danger. Initially, dismissal felt easy, perhaps a father capturing fleeting moments, but his movements were methodical, detached. He drifted, a phantom at the periphery of laughing clusters, always alone, always observing. The camera, slung with casual expertise, was no tourist's toy. Its lens gleamed with professional intent, incongruous amidst the holiday's easy sprawl. I nudged Lena. See that man? Over by the maples with the camera? Her gaze followed mine, a slight furrow deepening between her brows. Yeah, so? I don't know. My voice dropped, conspiratorial despite the open air. Something feels dissonant. He's been photographing the kids, just the kids for ages, no family with him. Lena's eyes widened, catching the spark of my unease. You don't think... My nod was grim, a silent confirmation of the fear. I'm going to wander over. Keep the little ones close? She caught my forearm, her grip tight. Alara, be careful, please. What if he's... I manufactured a smile, hoping it masked the tremor beneath. I handle difficult people daily, remember? It'll be fine. Maybe just keep your phone handy. Approaching him, I draped myself in an assumed nonchalance, a casual friendliness I didn't feel. He was ordinary, aggressively so, middle-aged, clad in forgettable khakis and a polo, the kind of man who fades into any background. Perfect light for pictures today, isn't it? I offered, positioning myself beside him. He flinched, almost imperceptibly, lowering the camera. Oh, yes, lovely. Getting some wonderful shots of your children, I bet. I watched his face, searching for the tell. A minuscule flicker, panic, resentment, skittered across his features before being smoothed over by a practiced smile. No children here, freelance work, capturing the holiday spirit, you understand? Warning chimes resonated in my skull. Really? Which publications? The hesitation, though brief, was damning. Oh, various local outlets, you wouldn't know them. The time for subtlety evaporated, you know. I kept my tone level, parental. As a mother myself, I'd find it unsettling, a stranger photographing my children without asking. Perhaps the patriotic bunting or the food stalls would make better subjects. His transformation was instantaneous. The flimsy affability dissolved, leaving something glacial and sharp. Look, lady, the word was a low growl. Who do you think you are? It's a public park. I can photograph whatever I damn well please. My feet felt rooted, even as adrenaline surged. Actually, no, not minors without consent. I need you to leave now, or the police get involved. For a heartbeat, I thought compliance flickered in his eyes. Then his hand lashed out, fingers clamping onto my wrist with startling, bruising pressure. "You're not calling anyone," he hissed. The world compressed into a frantic scramble of instinct and training. I twisted sharply, breaking his hold with a technique drilled into muscle memory. He lunged, the heavy camera swinging like a mace. Air whispered past my ear as I ducked. Shouts erupted around us now, the sound distorted. Children screamed. In the periphery, Lena's face was pale, her phone pressed to her ear. 911. He must have sensed the closing net. He pivoted, intending to flee, but a certainty had solidified within me, cold and hard. He couldn't escape, not with what I now suspected. I launched myself forward, tackling him low, sending us both sprawling onto the sun-baked earth. We wrestled amidst the flattened grass and dirt, a tangle of limbs, his desperate attempts to break free, my fierce determination to hold him, fueled by righteous fury and the ghosts of children I'd fought for before. He possessed a brute strength I lacked, but my resolve burned hotter, the conviction of someone who recognized the predator's shadow. Then the piercing, beautiful wail of sirens sliced through the chaos. His struggles intensified. A fist connected solidly with my ribs, stealing my breath. But his time was up. Firm hands hauled him off me. Through watering eyes, I saw uniformed officers grappling him into restraints. I pushed myself up, wincing, my side screaming protest. His camera lay abandoned in the grass, its screen fractured but illuminated. What flickered there sent ice through my veins. Not just park scenes. Other images, far darker, infinitely more disturbing. Children arranged in corrupted tableaus, their innocence stolen, twisted into something vile. Bile rose in my throat. I had to wrench my gaze away. The ensuing hours dissolved into a haze. Police reports, paramedics checking my ribs. The man, they revealed, was a ghost haunting law enforcement databases across 3 states, wanted for the creation and trade of child exploitation material. My gut feeling, that prickle of wrongness, had been horrifyingly accurate. My intervention had likely shielded unknown children from his lens, from his intentions. Yet, as the adrenaline ebbed, leaving behind the stark reality, a violent tremor took hold of me. Lena held me, her own tears tracking paths through the dust on her cheeks. "He could have killed you," she whispered, her voice thick. "But he didn't," I managed, the words steadier than the ground beneath me, and neither did anyone else. In the following days, the label hero attached itself to me. News crews materialized. Grateful park parents sought me out. But the accolades felt hollow against the persistent darkness imprinted on my mind. The memory of the struggle, the indelible horror of those digital images, the chilling knowledge of his actions, his plans. I plunged back into my work, propelled by a renewed, desperate urgency to shield the vulnerable. I argued for stricter legislation, for better tools to hunt monsters like him. Sleep offered little respite, haunted by replays of the park, by the camera's sick glow, by the faces of children I could never reach. Healing was a slow, uneven path, navigated with professional help. The sights couldn't be unseen, the awareness of such profound darkness couldn't be unlearned. But the knowledge, the visceral experience could be forged into purpose. Years have passed. I still find myself drawn to that park each 4th of July. I watch the children tumble and shriek with laughter, a bittersweet ache tightening my chest, joy mingled with an unwavering vigilance. The world holds immense peril, yes, but also a fierce, fragile beauty worth defending. Sometimes my eyes still sweep the crowds, instinctively seeking solitary figures, assessing cameras. An old reflex, perhaps, but fear has transmuted into resolve. Because I know for every shadow that lengthens, there are those like me prepared to step into the light to shield the defenseless. The man with the camera imparted a brutal lesson about the world's hidden fractures, but he also illuminated the fierce power of intuition, the necessity of acting despite fear, despite discomfort. A single individual can shift the balance. One act of courage can ripple outwards, altering unseen futures. As fireworks bloom against the twilight canvas, painting the sky in violent bursts of crimson, white, and sapphire, I silently reaffirm my vow to be that person, to find that courage, because ultimately freedom isn't merely about celebrating a nation's birth. It's about safeguarding its most fragile citizens. Independence Day remains etched with complexity for me now. A reminder of terror faced, yes, but also of the unexpected strength discovered within, and the quiet truth that ordinary hands can become the unlikely guardians our world so desperately needs. It was on a Wednesday, deep into the night's marrow, that the footprints first materialized. Only 7 days had I inhabited the house, a solitary sentinel against the winter sea. No strangeness was anticipated. I courted the quiet, the stark loneliness even, a necessary void to nurture the project consuming my days. This coastal refuge, usually pulsing with summer life shared among friends, now stood gaunt and deserted. The village shuttered itself early, the darkness swallowing sounds of cars or voices, leaving only the wind's lament and the ocean's ceaseless sigh for company. Midnight had chimed its departure before exhaustion claimed me, the day a blur against a looming deadline. Sleep, however, proved shallow. Around 3, A parching thirst dislodged me from bed. I rose, navigated the shadowed corridor, feet whispering on cool floorboards, toward the kitchen's promise of water. An unfamiliar cold permeated the air, sharp and distinct. Floorboards groaned under my weight. A dampness clung to the atmosphere, the unmistakable tang of salt water, sharp and invasive. Perhaps a window left carelessly ajar. My thoughts drifted to the sliding glass door at the rear, a portal opening directly onto the sandy path that bled into the shore. A quick check confirmed it, securely locked. Returning through the kitchen's dimness, my gaze snagged on the floor tiles. There, gleaming wetly, were footprints. Bare feet stark against the pale ceramic. They commenced near the sealed glass door, traversed halfway across the room, and then curved, vanishing around the corner leading toward the living space. I halted, breath catching. Spillage! My mind scrabbled for logic, but these were undeniably prints. Articulated arches and toes marching from the threshold towards the house's heart. I tracked them, a hesitant investigator in my own home. They faded progressively, dissolving entirely at the living room carpet's edge. No puddle, no lingering trail, merely those phantom impressions on the tile. A knot tightened low in my gut. Retreating to the door, I commenced a frantic, methodical search. Behind the sofa's bulk, within the shadowed recesses of closets, I slid the back door open again, peering into the yard. The moon, a weak informant, painting the sand in shades of gray. Empty, utterly empty. Securing the lock once more, I fetched paper towels, erasing the damp evidence. A peculiar moisture issue, I reasoned fiercely. A trick of condensation, a small leak finding an unusual expression. Wind, perhaps, forcing spray through some infinitesimal gap beneath the door. The explanation felt hollow even as I formed it. Water doesn't sculpt perfect footprints from caprice. Sleep became an elusive quarry. Back in bed, every creak of the old house sent jolts through my system, my pulse a frantic drum against my eardrums. Half-hourly pilgrimages to the kitchen yielded nothing. The floor remained blessedly unmarked for the remainder of that night. Daylight brought a forced attempt at normalcy. I submerged myself in work, stationed at the small table overlooking the restless gray sea. My eyes strayed often to the glass door, scanning the desolate beach beyond. Nothing stirred. Around noon, needing air, I ventured out. The wind lashed my face, raw and cold. Gulls wheeled on pewter skies. The sand, frigid beneath my boots, bore no other human trace. This daytime emptiness offered a fragile peace, yet the memory of the footprints clung like sea mist. That night, the pattern held. Sleep, sought earlier around 11, fractured near the same pre-dawn hour. This time, a sound preceded the awakening, a soft, dull thudding against the back door. Not a decisive knock, but a persistent, muffled impact, like something heavy and yielding striking the glass. My heart leaped, a frantic bird against my ribs. I lay frozen for a beat, mind racing, before swinging my legs out of bed. The flashlight, my bedside sentinel, felt cool in my grasp as I padded down the hallway, the wood icy against my bare soles. Reaching the kitchen's edge, I stilled, listening intently. The sound repeated, 3 slow, resonant thumps. The door vibrated faintly as if under pressure. With a trembling hand, I flicked the overhead light switch. The sudden glare tightened the knot in my stomach. Through the glass, nothing. Was it just the gale, a loose branch performing a macabre dance? Again, the knocks, softer now, almost pleading. Drawing a ragged breath, I gripped the cold metal handle and pulled the door inward. Void. Only the wind rushed in, carrying the chill and the briny breath of the ocean. I swept the flashlight beam across the sand outside. No marks, no disturbance, nothing human, nothing animal. My breathing grew shallow, audible in the sudden quiet. I slammed the door shut, the lock clicking with exaggerated loudness. My hand shook. Then, from the hallway behind me, a noise. A low, wet, dragging sound, like saturated fabric being pulled across the wooden floor. I spun, flashlight beam stabbing into the corridor's darkness. The overhead kitchen light chose that moment to flicker erratically. Slapping the switch yielded only more frantic blinking. A step forward and a chill traced its icy path from my nape to my wrists. The flashlight beam danced up and down the empty passage. Nothing. Toward the living room I crept, my shoes squeaking faintly on the polished wood. The air thickened, saturated with an overpowering odor. Saline, vegetal, the smell of seaweed dredged from the depths and left to rot. It pressed in, suffocating. I scanned the living room. All seemed undisturbed. The main light continued its epileptic fit, but a small lamp near the sofa offered a pool of steady, if weak, illumination. No movement. Silence, save for my own frantic pulse and the refrigerator's low thrum from the kitchen. The remainder of the night passed under the glare of every available lamp. The television mumbled inanities, a bulwark against the silence. Sleep, when it finally came near sunrise, found me slumped on the sofa, unwilling to brave the shadowed hallway again. Morning revealed a stiff neck and an empty floor. No new footprints, yet the faint, pervasive scent of brine and decay lingered, defying the sealed windows and locked doors. I stepped outside, compelled to seek physical evidence. The beach remained starkly vacant. Circling the house, I examined the sand, the window frames, the door jambs. Nothing. Just the typical tableau of off-season neglect. Neighboring houses shuttered like closed eyes, driftwood scattered like bones. The ever-present gulls carving arcs against the gray canvas. I tried calling Marcus, co-owner of this unsettling haven, voicemail. I left a halting message, mentioning the strangeness, asking if such phenomena had predecessors. My phone remained stubbornly silent throughout the day. Evening approached, bringing with it a rising tide of apprehension. Departure seemed the only sane option. My supplies were adequate for several more days, but comfort had fled. Work progressed in fits and starts, overshadowed by the nocturnal dread, the gnawing fear of unseen company. One more night, I decided, a final test. Perhaps the house was merely old, its plumbing given to groans and sighs. Perhaps the prints were atmospheric quirks, bizarre condensation patterns. Logic felt thin, a fraying thread, but I clung to it. Dinner was a perfunctory affair. Microwaved sustenance, a glass of water. I fought sleep, keeping vigil with the television's flickering companionship. Every light blazing defiance against the encroaching dark. Around midnight, exhaustion began its inexorable siege. Muscles screamed with tension, eyes burned. A quick trip to the bathroom, teeth brushed, and then, steeling myself, I headed for the bedroom. I left the hall light burning, the bedroom light on as well. The door clicked shut behind me. The lock turned. 3 a.m. again. This time, no knocks, but a sound far more intimate, more unnerving, scraping along the wall just outside my door. A dry, steady scratch, 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 like fingernails drawn deliberately across the wood grain. My heart hammered against my ribs. Sweat beaded on my forehead. I fumbled for my phone, the impulse to call for help warring with the utter futility of it. Who would come? The nearest outpost of authority felt worlds away, and what crime could I even report? Unlocking the door, I eased it open a mere crack, peering into the illuminated hallway. The overhead light flickered weakly, casting pulsing shadows. That smell again, thick and oceanic, the scratching intensified, seeming to emanate from the very air beside me, though the corridor remained visually empty. "Hello?" The whispered word died in my dry mouth. Flashlight clutched tight, I advanced slowly, constantly glancing over my shoulder, every nerve anticipating sudden movement from the periphery. The kitchen lay in darkness. The main light switch responded with a final defiant flicker before surrendering entirely. Only the small bulb above the stove cast a feeble spectral glow, and there, on the tiles, droplets, a scattering of water forming a glistening trail from the back door, leading toward the center of the room. Again, crouching, I touched one, ice cold. I rose, following the damp path as it snaked toward the living room, halting precisely where the carpet began. The dragging sound returned, emanating from within the living room itself. I stepped cautiously over the threshold. The floor lamp sputtered, blinked, but held, bathing the furniture in its unreliable light. Near the window, movement snagged my attention. I turned. For a sliver of a second, silhouetted against the curtains, stood a shape. Tall, indistinct, featureless in the gloom. Then the lamp blinked out, plunging the room into blackness. My heart felt poised to burst. I heard it then. Wet, shuffling footsteps on the carpet moving away from me. When the lamp flickered back to life seconds later, the space was empty. The curtains hung undisturbed. Rushing to the window, I tore them aside. Nothing outside. No damp marks on the carpet near the sill. Only that potent, cloying odor, the concentrated reek of a trawler's deck after a long haul. My body began to tremble uncontrollably. Hands shook, temples throbbed. Breath came in ragged gasps. I switched on every lamp that still functioned and sank onto the sofa, eyes darting, waiting. The impulse to flee warred with a strange paralysis, a morbid curiosity. If I left now, would the mystery remain forever unsolved? Was this merely sleep deprivation playing tricks on a frayed mind? Skepticism is my default state. I demand proof. Yet the wet prints, the sounds, the pervasive stench, they were undeniable sensory data. I forced myself to remain awake, rigid on the sofa, until the first tentative fingers of dawn crept through the windows. In the daylight, the house seemed to shed its menace, resuming its guise of ordinary emptiness. The salt smell persisted, albeit fainter. The living room carpet was dry, unmarked. No signs of forced entry, no damage anywhere. The kitchen light, however, continued its intermittent flickering even now. I called an electrician, stressing urgency. He offered a vague promise of appearing in a few days. Around noon, Marcus finally returned my call. I recounted the events, the footprints, the sounds, the smell. A pause stretched across the line before he spoke. He'd never experienced anything similar, he admitted. But then he'd never braved the house alone in the dead of winter. His advice was unequivocal. If I felt unsafe, I should leave. Immediately. Agreement came easily. Packing was a swift, almost frantic affair. Windows secured, appliances silenced, doors locked. Suitcase bumping against my leg, I carried it to the car. One final walkthrough, a compulsion I couldn't resist. The living room stood silent, the kitchen quiet. I stepped into the hallway, turning toward the bedroom for my forgotten laptop bag, and stopped dead. Leading from my bedroom door, stark against the pale wood, were fresh footprints, wet, perfectly formed, glistening, as if someone had just emerged from the frigid Atlantic and walked this path moments ago. They marched down the corridor, ending abruptly, inevitably, at the living room carpet's edge. I froze, heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my sternum. The air grew thick with the scent of algae and brine. The fine hairs on my arms prickled. No sound escaped my lips. I moved quickly, mechanically into the bedroom, snatched the bag, and fled the house without a backward glance, leaving the damp evidence undisturbed. I locked the front door, scrambled into the car, engine roaring to life. Driving away, my eyes kept darting to the rearview mirror, watching the house and the desolate beach recede. A palpable tension remained coiled in my chest, the unnerving certainty of unseen eyes following my departure. Now ensconced in the borrowed safety of a friend's city apartment, the beach house feels like a fever dream. Marcus and the others have pressed for details. I offer only the raw facts, the prints, the noises, the smell that still haunts my memory. Speculation feels pointless. They were real. At night, the house sometimes rebuilds itself in my subconscious. I see the footprints ending mid-stride. I hear the sodden knocking, inhale the phantom scent of the deep. Waking, I scan my own dry floors, reassured yet unsettled. What resided within those walls, I cannot say. If it remains, I do not know. But the prospect of returning to that isolation, to that place by the winter sea, holds no appeal. Not ever again, not alone. "911, state your emergency." My voice a practiced calm against the tide of chaos. Another structure fire painting the city map red. 12 hours deep, the console lights blurring, the headset a permanent fixture, the calls relentless waves against the shore of my shift. Easy then to nearly overlook the tiny, insistent blink of the low fuel light. Nearly. Dispatch grinds details into you, the tremor beneath a caller's bravado, the ambient noise sketching a hidden narrative, the rhythms that whisper life or its abrupt cessation. So, pulling into the spectral glow of the all-night beacon station off Highway 9, an unease prickled before conscious thought could name it. Fluorescent tubes hummed, bathing the deserted tarmac in a sterile, unforgiving light. An ossified moment wedged between the dying night and the unborn dawn. Only one other vehicle shared the space, a bruised sedan, its left taillight a dark socket. Card sliding into the pump's slot, then, "Excuse me?" I started turning. She stood too close, materializing from the shadows. 30s, perhaps, swimming in a wrinkled power suit, incongruous against the 3 a.m. backdrop. Mascara tracked like faint bruises beneath her eyes. A tremor ran through her despite the mild spring air. "I'm terribly sorry," she began, twisting her hands, a frantic knot of fingers. My car gave out down the road, mile or two back. Phone's dead as a stone. Could you possibly... A ride? Just to Oak Haven? My sister's there. 8 years tethered to the city's pulse sharpens your senses. Her story felt thin. The suit, though creased, was immaculate. No roadside grime, no frantic sweat stains. And stranded. I hadn't passed anyone hoofing it along the highway shoulder. There's a phone inside, I offered, nodding toward the brightly lit storefront where Sal, the night clerk, watched us through the glass. He'll let you call your sister, I'm sure. A flicker, something hard, fleeting, crossed her features before the mask of desperation snapped back. Please, she urged, stepping nearer, invading my space. It feels wrong, out here alone. You seem kind, like you help people. My gaze snagged on the reflection blooming in my car's side window, the sedan's passenger door easing open, a silent, predatory yawn. Actually, I kept my tone level, pulling the nozzle free with deliberate slowness. Better than a ride. I'm emergency dispatch. Let me get someone official out here. My hand moved toward my work phone, the direct line to patrol units. She reacted with startling swiftness, her grip latching onto my forearm. No cops! The plea vanished, replaced by a raw command. Fingernails bit into flesh as she tugged me toward the sedan. Get in the car, now, don't fight. Instinct surged, hot and immediate. I ripped my arm away, simultaneously smashing the heel of my hand against my car's panic button. The siren shrieked, tearing the night's fabric. Backpedaling toward the beacon's entrance, I saw Sal, already dialing, his face grim. A man erupted from the sedan's passenger side, spitting curses, closing the distance. The woman, Sylvie, lunged again, but the station door hissed shut behind me. Sal, ex-security, materialized from behind the counter, a Louisville slugger held ready. Patrol's ETA 3 minutes, he stated, his voice a low anchor, planting himself between me and the glass. Outside, tires screamed. The sedan fishtailed out onto the highway, leaving twin scars of burnt rubber on the asphalt. Tremors started in my hands as I relayed the sedan's description, its flight path, to my own colleagues miles away. Minutes later, the forecourt pulsed red and blue, patrol cars swarming the pumps. The subsequent investigation uncovered a chilling pattern along Highway 9. Lone women approached at desolate stations, coaxed with tales of distress, then abducted. Some fought free, others vanished. My dispatcher's intuition, the detectives confirmed, likely kept me off their grim ledger. Sal waved away my attempt to pay for the gas I hadn't pumped. You read it right, he said, escorting me to my car after my statement. Good heart doesn't mean a blind eye. Instincts matter. The following weeks saw the beacon transform. Sal lobbied the owner. Brighter perimeter lighting, more cameras. Signs appeared, warning of common ruses, offering the store phone for emergencies. 2 clerks now manned the graveyard shift. I found myself stopping by often, gas tank be damned, sometimes bringing thermoses of coffee for Sal and Chloe, his new partner. We'd swap night shift oddities, but also tactics, vigilance, watching out. One evening, I found Sal patiently showing a young woman how to wield her keys between her knuckles. Know it and not need it, he advised her solemnly, beats needing it and not knowing. She wasn't the only one. The beacon became a quiet sanctuary, an informal nexus of safety for the nocturnal traveler. They caught the pair eventually, Sylvie and her partner Jax, 3 states away, ensnaring another victim with the same tired script. Sylvie wasn't their first accomplice. They preyed on the vulnerable to help them prey on others, a chain reaction of fear. Now taking calls from stranded motorists at dispatch. That night echoes. We dispatch aid, absolutely, but with caveats, warnings whispered to responding units. Caution isn't callousness, it's intelligent compassion. When a rookie recently asked how I managed the pressure, the constant crises, I told her about the beacon, about how true danger often arrives not with sirens, but with a plausible lie, a practiced vulnerability. Trust the protocols, I said, but honor that deep thrum of wrongness when it comes. In our line of work, that instinct saves more than just yourself. The beacon station is something of a landmark now for local cruisers. Officers make regular check-ins, sharing a nod with Sal and Chloe. Their quiet vigilance has diverted trouble more than once, simply by being present, by questioning the dissonant notes. Sometimes I replay that night, the precipitous slide toward disaster. Mostly, though, I consider the unexpected community forged in its wake, the network of shared awareness, the refusal to let menace extinguish empathy, because that's the enduring truth. Genuine kindness isn't naivete. It's building bulwarks, illuminating the shadowed corners where vulnerability festers, ensuring that in those hushed, pause-buttoned hours, no one truly stands alone against the dark. Weeks of unrelenting pressure had hollowed Elias out. The city's ceaseless clamor gnawed at his nerves, a grinding erosion of spirit. Escape became not a desire, but a necessity. He found refuge in a listing, a secluded cabin nestled beside Mirror Mere, deep in the foothills bordering the vast wilderness. Familiar from a past visit, compact, rustic, perched over the water's edge. A sanctuary deliberately unplugged, miles from the nearest soul, promising only the whisper of pines and the solace of stillness. He reached it as dusk bled across the sky. The cabin stood sentinel just as memory held it. Weathered timber, a modest veranda gazing onto the lake. Keys retrieved from the cold lockbox, he pushed inside, crossing a threshold into profound quiet. Pine resin and seasoned wood scented the air. Beyond the walls, the lake breathed softly against the shore, a counterpoint to the wind sighing through the canopy. Bags dropped, jacket donned. He stepped back onto the veranda to absorb the fading light, feeling the knots within him begin to loosen. This, he affirmed, was the balm required. On the veranda, Elias lingered, immersed in the woodland symphony, drawing deep drafts of untainted air. The sun slid beneath the horizon, painting the water in long, melancholic strokes of shadow. Sunrise, he promised himself, would be witnessed. Later, cocooned inside, door secured, a fire crackled to life in the hearth, casting dancing light upon the log walls. Mug of herbal tea warming his hands, a novel open on his lap. The cabin felt like a bastion against the world. Dim, intimate, profoundly secure. Reading yielded to drowsiness, the forest's nocturnal murmurings a lullaby as sleep claimed him. The initial night passed undisturbed. Dawn arrived crisp and clear, Coffee in hand, Elias watched from the veranda as the sun ignited the sky. Mirror, mirror, a flawless-looking glass reflecting the awakening world. A potent sense of belonging settled over him. The day unfolded in exploration, tracing trails that wound through sun-dappled woods, lungs filling with the clean scent of earth and pine. Weariness, welcome and earned, brought him back by evening. A simple meal, another hour lost in his book beside the fire, then early to bed. But as slumber hovered near on this second night, a discordance entered the quiet. Faint yet distinct, the brittle snap of dry leaves underfoot, suggesting movement just beyond the walls. Elias froze, instantly alert, pulse quickening. Silence descended once more. An animal, surely? A foraging deer, perhaps a curious fox. He willed his eyes shut, seeking the calm of reason. Yet the sound returned, a measured tread, slow and purposeful, completing a circuit of the cabin. He sat bolt upright, every muscle taut. The pacing ceased, then resumed its deliberate path around the structure's perimeter. Slipping from bed, Elias crept to the window, straining to pierce the moon-dappled gloom. Only familiar shapes emerged, skeletal trees, shifting shadows. His fingers instinctively sought his phone, a useless gesture remembering the digital void, a steadying breath. It had to be wildlife. Who else would roam this remote place? Retreating to bed, pulling the covers high, he fought the unease. Eventually the sound ceased, leaving only the profound stillness of the deep woods. Morning light revealed nothing. A careful inspection around the cabin's foundation yielded no tracks, no disturbed earth, not a single sign of a nocturnal visitor. A wave of self-consciousness washed over Elias. Had fatigue and isolation conjured phantoms? Merely the imaginings of a mind half lost in dreams. He dismissed the incident, forcing himself to embrace the tranquility he'd sought. Yet the third night shattered his forced composure. Again, on the cusp of sleep, the footsteps returned. Bolder now, closer, unmistakably present. Elias shot upright, heart hammering against his ribs. He listened, paralyzed as the slow, methodical rhythm circled the cabin, pausing almost inquisitively at each aspect. Trembling, he forced himself to the window once more, and this time his breath hitched. A shape detached itself from the deeper darkness near the tree line. A silhouette against the scant moonlight. Tall, undeniably human in form, yet indistinct. A fluid darkness moving with unnerving deliberation. Rooted to the spot, Elias watched, the frantic beat in his chest threatening to consume him. The figure completed its circuit, pausing near the front door. No features were discernible, yet an oppressive sense of scrutiny emanated from it, a palpable weight in the night air. It knew he was watching. He felt the unseen gaze like a physical touch. Stumbling back from the window, thoughts fractured by panic, no signal, no lifeline, utterly isolated, miles from any other human presence. He fumbled for the heavy flashlight in his bag, its cold metal a meager comfort, gripping it like a cudgel. Retreating to the farthest corner, he sank to the floor, waiting, straining to hear over the blood rushing in his ears. An eternity seemed to pass before the footsteps receded into the woods. Silence reclaimed the cabin, but peace did not. Sleep was impossible. He remained huddled in the dark, gaze flicking constantly towards the windows, anticipating the return of that unnerving shadow. Daylight brought no relief, only a heightened state of anxiety. Every creak of the cabin, every rustle in the leaves sent jolts of adrenaline through Elias. Another fruitless search outside confirmed the impossible. No tracks, no evidence. Yet the memory of the figure was indelible, chillingly real. He surrendered any pretense of sleep that night. Huddled in the main room, lamps blazing defiance against the encroaching dark, the flashlight a permanent fixture in his white-knuckled grip. Rationalizations warred with primal fear. Imagination, paranoia. Then, near midnight, the familiar cadence began anew. Louder this time, unhurried. The presence circled, pausing at each window pane. A soft, rapping sound followed, chillingly delicate against the glass. Tap, 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 moving methodically from one window to the next. Less a demand, more a ghastly invitation. Elias's stomach clenched. He remained utterly still, scarcely breathing. The tapping persisted, patient, relentless, as if time were meaningless to the visitor. Then, abruptly, it ceased. A suffocating silence descended thick with anticipation. He waited, coiled tight. From the threshold directly outside the front door, a sound slithered into the stillness. A low, intimate whisper. "Let me in." Ice flooded Elias's veins. He held his breath motionless. The whisper repeated, sibilant and dreadfully close, seemingly penetrating the very wood of the door. "Let me in." He scrambled backward on trembling limbs, taking refuge behind the worn sofa, trying to shrink into the shadows. A primal sense of being cornered, prey awaiting the inevitable. Again, the whisper, sharp now, insistent. "Let me in." Something within him snapped. Raw terror propelled him towards the cabin's rear exit. Fumbling with the lock, he burst out into the oppressive darkness of the woods. He ran, heedless of the branches that tore at his skin and clothes, propelled only by blind panic. Air seared his lungs. His legs screamed in protest, directionless, driven solely by the need for distance. Time lost meaning until, miraculously, his stumbling flight deposited him onto a rough track. He followed it, driven by sheer will, until the blessed glare of headlights pierced the gloom. He flung himself into their path, waving frantically. A vehicle slowed, a window descended, a concerned face peered out. Coherent words failed him, only fragmented pleas for help, a babble about being pursued. Understanding dawned in the driver's eyes. Elias was pulled into the sanctuary of the car, driven towards the distant lights of civilization and the promise of authority. The authorities returned to Mirror Mere. Their investigation was thorough, clinical. They found the cabin undisturbed. No tracks beyond Elias's own frantic prints leading away. No indication of attempted entry. An animal, they suggested gently. A bear, perhaps, known to exhibit curiosity. The voice, they concluded, a product of extreme fear, an auditory hallucination born of panic in the deep, isolating woods. Elias listened, nodded, but the certainty remained locked within him, cold and hard. He knew what he had heard, what he had seen, what he had felt, and in the quiet solitude of sleepless nights, far from the whispering pines and the still waters of the mere, the echo persists, a phantom murmur forever etched into his memory. "Let me in." That obsidian shape, swimming in the heat haze of my rear-view mirror for the third time, that's when the certainty crystallized. This was no random convergence. My westward pilgrimage, conceived in hopeful anticipation, had warped into a predator's pursuit across the asphalt plains, and I, Ilara, was the quarry. San Francisco beckoned, a shimmering promise at the end of a ribbon of highway unfurling from Chicago. Flying felt too sterile, too abrupt for such a life shift. I craved the slow immersion, the continent unfolding mile by patient mile. My trusty, slightly battered Astra, the Comet, held the sum of my earthly possessions, artifacts for a future life. Excitement hummed beneath my skin, that particular vibration born of vast distances and unknown destinations. Day one dissolved in a blur of smooth tarmac and efficient refueling stops. As twilight bled across the sky, I surrendered to fatigue, pulling into a motel scraped from the celluloid of some forgotten noir film, its neon signs stuttering, paint flaking like sunburnt skin. Adequate, affordable. And there it sat, several spaces down, a leviathan of chrome and black enamel, windows opaque as obsidian, devoid of any identifying insignia. A prickle of disquiet traced my spine, dismissed swiftly as exhaustion's phantom limb. Sleep claimed me. Dawn broke sharp and clear. Eager to reclaim lost miles, I merged onto the highway. An hour later, the monolith materialized behind me. It maintained a respectful distance, yet recognition struck like a gong. The same truck. Mere coincidence, I insisted. The highway a shared artery. But when I veered off for fuel, it mirrored my maneuver. Inside, paying, grabbing lukewarm coffee, I emerged into the harsh sunlight and found him standing there. The driver, a broad, weathered man, perhaps 50 years deep, face obscured by a grizzled beard and impenetrable mirrored lenses. A curt nod passed between us as I squeezed by, the ghost of a smile playing on his lips, unsettling my very core. Back on the interstate, the truck slotted in behind the Comet once more. Rationalizations warred with a primal dread curdling in my stomach, a major route teeming with haulers. Still, the instinct screamed. At the next unsigned exit, a sudden swerve. No signal flashed. It followed. My pulse hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat confirming the unthinkable. This was deliberate. I sought refuge in a bustling rest area, parking strategically within view of the main building. The restroom's cool tiles offered scant comfort. Splashing water on my face did little to quell the rising tide of fear. Returning, my breath hitched. The black behemoth was parked tight against the Comet's flank, effectively pinning me in. Panic clawed at my throat. Its engine idled, a low, threatening rumble, the tinted glass reflecting only my own terrified face. As I neared, the passenger window hissed down. "Bit of bother, are we, little dove?" His voice, rough timbered, dripped with amusement. A shake of my head, my fingers clumsy with the keys. No, I'm fine, thank you." A low chuckle vibrated through the air, raising gooseflesh. "Certain, awful long way from your nest." How could he know? My hand trembled violently, the key scraping against the lock. I said I'm fine. I managed, injecting a firmness I didn't feel. The lock clicked open. I tumbled inside, slamming the door, thumbing the lock down instantly. His laughter followed me, louder this time. "All right then, travel safe, be seeing ya." Not farewell, a vow. I wrenched the Comet out of the parking space, tires squealing in protest. My mind spun, a chaotic vortex of questions. His motive, his identity, why me? The ensuing hours were a fever dream of evasive maneuvers, random exits taken at speed, doubling back on deserted county roads, praying to dissolve into the landscape. For a blessed interval, the mirror remained empty. Relief, fragile as spun glass, began to bloom. Perhaps I'd imagined the malice, magnified the coincidence. Then, rounding a sweeping curve, my hope shattered. There it was, parked on the shoulder, engine breathing softly. As I drew level, it slid seamlessly back onto the asphalt, resuming its patient, predatory position behind me. Terror, cold and absolute, seized me. He wasn't just following, he was playing. My hand scrabbled for my phone, the lifeline, only to find the screen dark, utterly lifeless. In the earlier panic, I'd neglected to plug it in. The charger lay buried deep within a duffel bag in the trunk, utterly, terrifyingly alone. The sun dipped low, painting the highway in long, ominous shadows. Exhaustion gnawed, adrenaline burning itself out, leaving only raw fear. I couldn't sustain this flight. I needed sanctuary. Ahead, signs promised a small town, a flicker of possibility. It wasn't much, but it was civilization. I took the exit ramp, the dark shape of the truck, an inescapable presence in my mirrors. The town was scarcely more than a main street, storefronts mostly shuttered against the encroaching night. My heart plummeted as I spotted the police station, locked, unlit, a notice promising presence. Back in the morning, desperation clawed. A diner radiating a warm yellow glow seemed the only refuge. I swung into its gravel lot. The truck rolled past, slow, deliberate. Through the gloom I saw his face, illuminated briefly by the dashboard lights. He was smiling. Inside, my legs threatened to buckle. I collapsed into a worn vinyl booth. A waitress, kindness etched around her eyes, approached. "Honey, you okay? Look like you've seen a spirit." Words failed me, how to articulate the terror. A truck following me. It sounded unhinged, paranoid, even to my own ears. "Just tired," I stammered. "Long haul." She offered a sympathetic nod. "Well, you rest yourself. Coffee's coming right up." As she turned towards the kitchen, the bell above the door chimed, a sound that froze the blood in my veins. I didn't look, couldn't look. Heavy footfalls approached my booth. "Mind if I join?" Silas. Up close, his presence was overwhelming. The mirrored glasses were gone, revealing eyes as cold and flat as river stones. Before I could utter a sound, he slid into the seat opposite me. Now, he murmured, his voice a low rumble. "No need for theatrics. Wouldn't want to disturb the peace, would we?" My gaze darted around the near-empty diner. The waitress had vanished into the back. An elderly man remained absorbed in his newspaper, oblivious. "What do you want?" The question emerged as a ragged whisper. He smiled, a predatory baring of yellowed teeth. "Think you know? Pretty little thing like yourself out here all alone. Dangerous roads." My mind raced, scrabbling for an escape, any leverage. Then my eyes snagged on it. A small, unassuming pin fastened to his worn denim jacket. A symbol. an insignia I recognized from faded photos of my brother back from his service days. A desperate gamble formed. 3rd Infantry Division, I blurted out, the words rushing. My brother, he was with the 3rd in Iraq. The transformation was instantaneous, startling. The predatory glint in his eyes flickered, extinguished, replaced by surprise. Then, could it be contrition? Your brother served? I nodded, pressing the advantage, clinging to this unexpected fissure in his terrifying facade. 2 tours. He didn't come home. A lie, sharp and necessary, delivered with trembling conviction. I watched his posture deflate, his gaze fall to his thick, calloused hands resting on the table. He couldn't meet my eyes. Sorry, he mumbled, the word thick, almost lost. For your loss, and for this. He stood abruptly, scraping the chair back. Without another word, he turned and walked out, the bell above the door marking his exit. Through the window, I watched the hulking shape of the truck pull away, its taillights shrinking into the darkness until they vanished completely. The waitress returned, coffee pot in hand, her expression unchanged. You sure you're all right, dear? You're pale as a ghost. A shaky smile touched my lips. I think I will be now. I remained in that diner's small circle of light until the first hint of dawn painted the eastern sky, nursing lukewarm coffee, the adrenaline slowly ebbing, leaving behind a bone-deep weariness. When I finally coaxed the Comet back onto the highway, the road ahead was clear. The rest of the journey unfolded without incident, yet the passage was irrevocably altered, shadowed by the memory. For months, the sight of any large truck sent jolts of panic through me. Sleep offered no escape, populated by endless asphalt ribbons and looming, faceless pursuers. Time sanded the sharpest edges of the terror, allowing reflection. The chilling proximity to becoming another unsolved disappearance, another whispered cautionary tale. I never filed a report. The story felt too thin, too spectral for bureaucratic forms, and a sliver of me held on to the hope that the mention of shared service, the lie about my brother, had struck some dormant chord of humanity within Silas. A resonance that might give him pause before hunting another solitary traveler. Years have passed. I still traverse those vast distances sometimes, but vigilance is now my constant co-pilot. The rearview mirror is scanned not with casual glances, but with practiced scrutiny, because the open road, beautiful and liberating as it seems, conceals dangers as immense as its horizons. The monsters aren't always mythical beasts lurking in shadows. Sometimes they drive alongside us, patiently waiting, their intentions hidden behind tinted glass. So trust that tremor of unease if a shadow lingers too long in your wake. Seek light, seek people, seek help. Out there on the lonely stretches, you can never be entirely certain who is watching. Before me presided the old Victorian guest house, its time-scarred timbers a somber counterpoint to the jaunty vacancy sign pulsing neon warmth in a lower window. As my sedan crunched onto the gravel path, the culmination of relentless hours traversing asphalt ribbons, little did I fathom that seeking refuge here would unravel into the singular catastrophe of my existence. Sometimes sanctuary transmutes into a cage. A haven can mask abysses beyond human dread. I am Alara, 35 years navigating the freelance currents as a chronicler of narratives dispatched from the rain-swept streets of Seattle. Weeks had bled into one another on the road. My quest, documenting the soul of small-town America for a nascent book. This secluded bed and breakfast, nestled deep within rural Maine's embrace, beckoned as an idol, a perfect juncture to marshal my scattered notes before the long journey homeward. Silas and Mildred, the proprietors, greeted my weary arrival with smiles etched deep by decades and the immediate comfort of oven-warm biscuits. Their solicitousness felt like a soothing unguent after a procession of sterile motel nights. As Mildred guided me upward, her voice a gentle murmur weaving tales of the house's lineage, a tension I hadn't realized I carried began to dissolve. The chamber assigned possessed a certain antiquated allure, though undeniably tethered to a bygone era. Walls bloomed with faded floral paper, a commanding four-poster dominated the space, and antique furnishings whispered of generations past, evoking the comforting clutter of a grandmother's domain. I shed my travel burdens, surrendered to the enveloping heat of a long shower, and nestled into the linens, anticipating a night of profound, uninterrupted slumber. Consciousness returned in the ink-black hours preceding dawn, a disorienting thirst clawing at my throat. My hand groped blindly for the bedside lamp's switch when a sound arrested my movement, the distinct cadence of footsteps pacing the corridor just beyond my door, punctuated by sibilant whispers that slithered through the wood. The timing is fortuitous. Hush now, not so strident, mustn't disturb her rest. A frantic drumbeat commenced against my ribs. An indefinable quality in their hushed exchange sent icy tendrils down my spine. Stealthily, I crept towards the door, pressing my ear flat against the cool, painted surface. Silas readies the cellar. We'll relocate her post-breakfast. Relocate me to the cellar? A cascade of nightmarish possibilities flooded my imagination. My fingers closed around the doorknob, twisting futilely, locked from the outside. Raw panic surged, hot and suffocating. I was ensnared. The benevolent grandparent charade performed by Silas and Mildred, exposed as a meticulously crafted lie. But to what end? And how many unsuspecting travelers had preceded me into this snare? A desperate clarity pierced the fear. Escape was imperative. Help must be summoned. The window emerged as the most viable egress. I eased the sash upward, each groan of the old wood a potential betrayal. The descent looked perilous, a significant drop to the earth below. Yet a latticework trellis, thick with ivy, seemed to offer a precarious ladder. Just as I braced myself to commit to the climb, the distinct metallic scrape of a key, turning in the lock, echoed from the hallway. I scrambled, diving back beneath the covers, arranging my limbs into a semblance of sleep as the door swung inward. Through eyelids slitted to mere fractions, I watched Silas enter. He carried implements that froze the marrow in my bones, coils of rope and a hypodermic needle glinting dully in the ambient gloom. I held my breath, waiting until he stood directly beside the bed before erupting. My legs shot out, connecting solidly with his midsection, A strangled gasp escaped him as he folded, clutching his stomach. In that instant, I launched myself towards the open doorway. Mildred stood sentinel in the hall, her kindly mask disintegrated, replaced by an expression of chilling resolve. "Now, pet, let's not complicate matters," she intoned, closing the distance between us with an agility that belied her apparent age. I ducked beneath her grasping hands, adrenaline propelling me down the main staircase, taking the steps in bounding pairs. Behind, Silas's enraged bellows mingled with the rapid patter of Mildred's pursuit. The front door, predictably, refused to yield, securely bolted. My flight path veered towards the kitchen, eyes scanning wildly for an alternative exit, and then I saw it, a door partially obscured by a tall pantry unit, the cellar entrance. Curiosity wrestled violently with primal fear. What secrets festered in that subterranean space? More critically, did it offer passage to the outside? With no time for deliberation, I wrenched the door open and plunged into the waiting darkness. The wooden stairs groaned their protest beneath my weight as I descended, the air growing progressively colder, thick with the scent of damp earth and something else, something metallic and stagnant. The scene that unfolded in the cellar's depths will remain seared into my memory until my dying breath. A cavernous room lay revealed, illuminated by the erratic flicker of long fluorescent tubes, casting everything in a pallid, unhealthy light. Arranged in stark, orderly rows were figures dozens upon dozens, secured to medical gurneys, intravenous lines snaking into their passive arms. Some lay utterly still, lost in unconsciousness. Others stirred fitfully, emitting low moans or twitching against their bonds. Upon a nearby steel table lay an array of vials containing substances of unknown origin, alongside medical instruments whose purpose I couldn't begin to decipher. My thoughts fragmented, struggling to coalesce around the horror I beheld. Was this some grotesque, clandestine medical trial? An underground network harvesting human organs? Before the implications could fully register, the sound of the cellar door creaking open drifted down from above. Silas's voice followed, a discordant blend of fury and feigned solicitude. "Alara, my dear, come now, no need for alarm. Our only desire is to assist you." Assist me? As they had assisted these other wretched souls. My gaze darted around, desperate for a weapon, any object to level the odds. That's when my eyes locked with hers, a young woman strapped to a gurney near the room's far end. Unlike the vacant stares surrounding her, her eyes held a spark of lucidity, of desperate awareness. Her lips moved silently, forming words, her head subtly indicating a corner shrouded in shadow. I edged closer, straining to comprehend her voiceless plea. "Key," she breathed, the sound barely audible. "Cabinet, red vial." There was no time for questions. The heavy tread of Silas and Mildred echoed on the stairs. I sprinted to the cabinet she'd pointed towards, yanking the door open. Inside lay a chaotic jumble of keys on various rings and vials, filled with liquids of differing hues. My fingers closed around a promising ring of keys and a small bottle containing a crimson fluid. I spun around, bracing myself as my captors reached the bottom step. Silas arrived first, his affable facade utterly shed, replaced by a countenance of glacial rage. You ought not to have ventured down here, Elara. You've compelled us to act. Mildred materialized at his shoulder, a syringe held firmly in her gnarled hand. It serves the greater good, pet. Your contribution will preserve countless lives. They advanced, inexorably backing me towards the cold stone wall. In a final act of desperation, I twisted the cap off the red vial and hurled its contents directly at them. The reaction was immediate, appalling. Where the liquid made contact with their skin, it erupted, bubbling and emitting acrid smoke. Shrieks tore from their throats as they clawed instinctively at their faces. I didn't linger to witness the outcome. I raced to the young woman who had guided me, my fingers fumbling frantically with the keys until one satisfyingly clicked in the lock of her restraints. "Clara," she gasped, staggering upright as I helped her. "We must move quickly." "The others," I protested, my gaze sweeping over the rows of helpless figures. "We can't just abandon them." But the opportunity had passed. Silas and Mildred, their features contorted by agony and fury, were already staggering, recovering, and worse, a ripple of movement spread through the room as other victims began to stir, their eyes fluttering open to reveal pupils dilated into vacant black pools. "Run!" Clara screamed, yanking me towards a small high window near the ceiling. "They're lost. Nothing we can do for them now." Together we shoved a heavy metal cabinet beneath the opening, scrambled atop it, and squeezed through the narrow aperture. We tumbled onto dew-slicked grass just as grasping hands scrabbled at our ankles from within. We fled into the pre-dawn gloom, resisting the urge to look back. Clara guided me towards a concealed vehicle she claimed belonged to a previous guest, the keys blessedly still dangling from the ignition. As we put distance between ourselves and that house of horrors, Clara recounted the ghastly truth. For decades, Silas and Mildred had been engaged in illicit experimentation, luring unsuspecting travelers into their web. They used their captives as unwilling subjects for a concoction they believed capable of elevating human consciousness. The reality was far grimmer. The drug reduced individuals to suggestible, mindless husks, suspended in a dreadful twilight between life and oblivion. We drove directly to the nearest constabulary, yet by the time law enforcement descended upon the bed and breakfast, Silas and Mildred had vanished. The cellar stood empty, meticulously purged of every trace of their monstrous activities. Were it not for Clara's corroborating presence, I might have convinced myself the entire ordeal was a fever dream born of exhaustion. The official inquiry remains open, though my optimism for their capture is scant. Clara and I initiated a small network, a support circle for those who have endured similarly inexplicable terrors, though our accounts often meet with disbelief. Sometimes in the dead quiet of night, I still perceive Silas's voice beckoning me towards the cellar's depths. I see Mildred's eyes, glacial and resolute, as she approaches with that needle, and I am haunted by the faces of those we were forced to leave behind. Do they still exist somewhere, adrift in that unholy limbo? I no longer seek solace in quaint bed and breakfasts. Chain hotels offer a comforting anonymity, a perceived shield. Even so, I compulsively check every lock, always mapping potential escape routes in my mind. For I have learned the terrible lesson. Malevolence can cloak itself in the most benevolent of smiles, and occasionally, the place promising the greatest comfort harbors the most profound danger.